firstly, thank you for joining us for this session this evening. It's great to have you with us. We've got a really exciting session, and we have a global expert with us this evening as well. So really excited to introduce James officially in just a moment. So the session today is going to be all about learning the skills to future-proof your digital career in cybersecurity and data. And both those industries are booming globally at the moment. There is so much demand. Cybersecurity has had a 0% unemployment rate for as long as I can remember, but data is starting to outweigh that slowly as well. So the demand is absolutely booming. Firstly, just housekeeping. You might have heard that we're recording this session, so if you do need to drop off at any point, don't worry. We will send this out to you over the next couple of days. So we've got a 60-minute session. We've got people from all different stages of their kind of career researching. We've got our students with us who are students with the learning people, so it's great to have you with us. We've got people with us who have made inquiries. You might have spoken to a career consultant before. You might not have had that consultation yet. And we've also got people that haven't inquired and probably don't know much about learning people because we shared the link on social media as well. So welcome to everyone. We know you're at all different stages of your learning journey, but we hope you're going to get a great deal out of this session. So we actually had a session when I woke up this morning, which was around 7 o'clock, and what we at now, just gone 6 o'clock, and that was to Australia and New Zealand, to our students out there. And James joined us from the west coast of America then, and we finished. I think it was around 1:45 in the morning, which is a great effort. I think he's had some sleep. I hope he's had some sleep and is fully rested. But James is the Chief Technical Evangelist at CompTIA. He also has a PhD as well. And I'm really excited to be talking to James and answering some of these questions today. So, James, did you manage to get some sleep?
I did indeed. I did indeed feel great. So thanks for asking. I always tell people it's got to be noon somewhere. I often give webinars on all hours. It's to be talking to folks in the world.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, glad you got some sleep. The other things just to point out is that this is a really engaging session. We want it to be engaging. We really want for you to ask your questions. And it doesn't matter what kind of questions they are. We're here to answer them. If you think they're basic, don't worry. Throw them into the mix because that's what we're here to do. Let's make it as engaging as possible. And we've got Rachel Kay, who's our Director of Education. She's going to be answering some questions if there's kind of any educational based questions really. So put them into the chat and the Q&A and we'll answer them as we go. So James, let's start. Sorry, if I'm Jono, I didn't introduce myself. I'm head of marketing at the Global Learning People. I just want to begin, and I'm going to pretend that I know nothing about CompTIA. And for all those people that don't know anything about CompTIA, can you tell us who they are and what they do?
CompTIA, we basically we represent industry company. We started back in the 1990s by solving problems, and we still solve problems. Back in the 90s, companies you've heard of, IBM, Dell, they all basically were getting together and complaining that they had education programs, but they weren't doing a great job helping people make great troubleshooting choices. And so somebody smart at CompTIA went, we solve problems. So how about we create an education program for you companies? And that was something called A+. Well, things have changed a lot over the decades. A+ still has morphed, but we've also gotten into cybersecurity, data, the cloud, AI. And the reason is because we, as an education company, we create education pathways, and those are aimed at solving. And it's not just somebody going, hey, that's a groovy idea. It's more, we ask people out in the industry, hey, what problems do you have and how can we solve them? So there's my long-winded way of explaining how we are an education company.
Yeah, fantastic. And the Learning People we inaugurated 15 years ago, supporting people, thousands of people into new careers. So we launched 15 years ago and we've been platinum partners with CompTIA for the majority of that time. And it's been a really lovely relationship. We do have a 97% employment success rate and we're all really focused on outcomes. So, when you come to us, you'll have a career consultation, speak to an expert about what the right pathway is for you, what transferable skills you've got. learn the certifications, pass your exams, and then hopefully we can secure employment with you. And that's where we're partnered with CompTIA as well to deliver those certifications. Um, so in terms of the agenda today, there's a few learning outcomes. The first one we can dive into is why cyber and data skills are in such high demand. So particularly over the last few years, data is growing exponentially. But why do you think these industries are growing so much, James?
The main thing is this. I do a lot of hiking and I do a lot of scuba diving. My analogy to this is data is a compass, allows an organization to stay on track. One time I was diving in a low visibility situation. It was actually in Scotland, up in something called the Orkney Islands, way above there. And in the Orkney Islands, there were a bunch of World War I and World War II ships that were sunk, and I was diving those. And I was going the wrong direction and I didn't realize it. And I was looking at my compass and I said to myself, "Huh, that's funny, my compass is off." Usually your compass is on, it's you who is off, right? And I was going out to sea. I was going the wrong direction. It would did well. And then I kind of came to my sense, maybe James, it's a good idea to listen to the data. And so I listened to the data and turned around, even though everything about me said, James, this is all wrong. But I was going the right direction. I started following that compass. What does that have to do with data? Um, Organizations used to be able to go by their gut or by the CEO's gut, whatever he or she, whatever they felt was right. Now you have to go with the data. So the reason why it has exploded is because organizations kind of, as technology has moved so fast and business needs shift so fast, and as globalization has taken over, it's just absolutely essential to have your compass ready. And you can only have that if you have good data analysts in your organization. There's my answer.
And in terms of cybersecurity, we see hacks every single day.
Oh
There's
yeah.
global hacks, particularly in the UK. We've had recent hacks at Marks and Spencers. Um, do you see the demand for cybersecurity professionals ever decreasing? Because it's been on a steady incline for a number of years.
Decades, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't see it going away. People think that all IT there's there's something strange, and maybe this isn't. So I do see it increasing. What's happening though is there's often is called a shift left world. Shift left, that phrase for saying we are expecting cybersecurity professionals and data professionals and tech professionals to know more things earlier. What shift left means. In other words, it's like, well, you got to skip those steps or learn things even quicker than ever before. I think a lot of people, Jono, at the back of their minds when it comes to tech, think that is a bubble. John, I don't know if you know what I mean by this. There's something implicit about tech that makes people, even people who are in the tech industry, that at the bottom, somewhere in the back of their minds, that maybe this is all going to end. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I know exactly what you mean. The bubble might burst at some point.
And we see, and we that is fed by all sorts of, I think, strange data. I work for the research department, and so I've been taught things like you have when you get data from whatever you're studying, it better be representative of what's really going on, because it's easy to kind of pick stuff that only, what should I say, that only confirms your bias. So here's the thing. A lot of the news, folks, that we get from about the tech industry, about technology, comes from the Silicon Valley world. And I'm talking about not just in the San Francisco Bay Area, but from pure tech companies, Meta or AWS. You got to understand, folks, that when you get a job, that when you prove your experience and when you get a job, it may not be in a tech company like Meta or Google or whatever. It could be for a bank. It could be for Marks and Spencer. It could be for a co-op. It could be for a lot of different a healthcare organization, a government. So there are many industry verticals. That's one of the things. So that bubble mentality, I think, is fed by a hype machine, and I think we need to be careful of that.
Yes, it's really interesting. So, James, whenever I speak to you, you're always somewhere around the world. You're always on a different time zone.
Yeah,
So, your role as chief technical evangelist at CompTIA,
that's
obviously,
right. Yeah.
um, Can you just tell us a bit more about what that role entails and what you actually do?
You bet. One of the things that I do is I spend a lot of time talking to industry leaders around the world in various sectors. So recently, I did let's say last I got home last week, and I was in the Philippines, I was in Japan, and then Australia. And in each of those, talk to not only industry leaders, but I talk to government leaders as well. And so that's one of the things that I do is I talk with chief information officers, chief security officers, the hiring managers that hire you. That's why I'm very confident that there are jobs out there. I'm confident because not only do we do research at CompTIA of thousands of people that I've never met, but I also so we have a tremendous quantity of information, but we also have quality of information in the sense that I talk to people and confirm a lot of that information. I also do a lot of education events and speaking and things like that. And I also out and I listen very carefully to the pain points of people out in the industry. You know, what's really bothering you? What is sapping your confidence? What about is so important? And then I bring that back and I help anyway. I'm one of the many voices who contribute to the certification and to the education programs at CompTIA. And in fact, a lot of times, if you were to take a course, for example, Security Plus, CompTIA Security Plus, you'll get videos where I'm interviewing people around the world. And so some see me demoing something like encryption or demoing something about the hacker lifecycle, things like that.
That's why we're in extremely safe hands tonight, to answer your questions. So make sure you keep sending the questions in, and we'll answer them over the 60 minutes. James, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you started off getting into tech?
It's a good question. Thank you for asking. It's always embarrassing to talk about these things. I said yeah, it's always, but it's kind of funny. First of all, I want to make sure, Jono, can you hear me? One of the comments was that my voice was lagging a bit. Are we okay?
It was buffering very slightly at the start, but it seems to be absolutely fine for the last five minutes or so.
Okay,
So all
good.
good for me. But please, everyone, shout if we are lagging in any way.
Thanks, folks. So the way I got started, folks, was I got my PhD in English, British Romantic literature, William Wordsworth and William Blake and things like that. And we had at that point 2 3/4 kids, my wife and I. And I suddenly realized I needed to get back into tech where I belonged because there just weren't a lot of job openings in, professors with British Romantic literature. And at that point, I was a dissertation fellowship, and so I needed to make a shift. Dissertation fellowship is great. They think you have tons of promise, and so they give you me. And so what I did is while I was finishing up my dissertation, I was also myself educated. So I was doing 2 or even 3 things at the same time because I was working, I was learning about tech, and I was finishing up my PhD. That was a busy time, and it was tough. Sometimes I still wonder if I have PT from from that. I'm kidding,
That
but
sounds busy.
well, it was brutal. It wasn't pleasant, but it had to be done. And so what I did is I started taking stock in what I had been doing over the last few years. And one of the things that I did, in addition to studying poetry, is I had a job at the time where and this was in I graduated with my PhD in 1997. I always call it my PhD in unemployment. Uh, I graduated in 97, but before then, in 1992, 93, and 94, I worked for in the basement of a library in Southern California, digitizing texts, ancient texts, 14th century, 15th century, 16th century, all the way through to the early 1800s, and putting them into databases, working on the internet. Now, this is in 1992, I was working with databases on the internet. Now, think about that. That's before Windows 95. Anybody old enough to remember that? So I took stock and realized that I didn't think I had ounce of experience in anything internet. People would ask me, I'm like, I don't know anything. And then suddenly one day somebody said, wait a minute, James, I thought you said you created databases and that you used the internet and people didn't even know what that was. And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess actually I did. And I realized that I had a tremendous amount of experience, but I just needed to tease of my brain and express it well on a resume. And I think this is one of the first things that I really wanted to talk today, because people really struggle when they are getting started in a career in breaking into this industry. I think it's a very difficult thing. I think it's about the most difficult thing you can do. John, I don't know. I don't want to make it sound like it's easy to learn this stuff. When I say this stuff, I mean the data lifecycle or the hacker lifecycle or how to reduce vulnerabilities in an organization. All that is tough to learn. But to me, the toughest thing is proving that you have the experience. I just think there are a lot of things against the person trying to break in.
So
You, all sorts of things. So, yeah.
yeah, so that I mean, there's some really interesting areas to focus on there. So you're saying that you really started by kind of building databases. Would you say that you started in data before it was cybersecurity?
Yes, absolutely. I was doing data before cybersecurity. That's a really good. Yes, absolutely. There was no sense of security. I
Yeah.
mean, yes, we had logging, but none of it was encrypted. I mean, and it was trivial. It was my email and then the password. Everybody had the same password. Think about that. I mean, this is a long time. Strangely, though, I have come across. I've been over the decades. I've done pen testing, and I've come across similar situations even last year. So stuff like that still happens. And that's
So
obviously low, but it happens.
so that was say back in '97 when you were building databases, or
Yep.
yeah,
Yep. From 1992 to 97. And
perfect.
then the things have changed a lot since then.
Yeah, well, exactly. I can still remember the dial-up code when you were turning on your internet, and uh, it's a sound that we'll probably never forget. Those that do remember that. So,
Oh,
so
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, moving forward from there. So you're saying it's tough to break into the industry. So you
Mhm.
were getting some kind of hands-on experience off your own accord.
See, that's the key. What I did is I didn't realize that I had more hands-on experience than I really did. And I remember sitting down, it was a person who was relatively technical. And that was a person she kind of pointed out to me in several different ways. It's like you do realize that you have far more technical experience than most people. You just are kind of hiding it. And the answer is, what are some of the ways that you can expose that and unhide that? And and I think that's tougher than it is. That's tougher to do than you'd think.
So then, when do certifications come into it? We say that certifications are your currency to
Yeah.
employment. Would that be the best way to break into the industry?
It's interesting that you asked that, because when I first started learning and getting the even better foundations, not only in data, but then learning about this internet thing better, and then about security and about the networking protocols. Uh, I eventually got CompTIA certified and also MCSE certified. And because of the CompTIA certifications that I got and MCSE in 1 year, I got, I can't remember, I think it was a $15,000, $20,000 pay raise. This is back around 2000, 1999, 2000. I didn't believe that those certs would help me or prove anything at all. And there were a lot of people at the time, though, like, oh, those are just paper certs. They're not useful. Well, I could tell you, in reality, what my experience is. And I've seen that experience replicated hundreds, if not thousands of times over the decades of being able, that certification actually helped me. So it helped me. I know it did. And it did two things. One, it gave me a foundational knowledge that I was missing various, how do you want to call it, pillars in that foundation. I was missing the certain areas. And once I filled them up, the certification helped me because it acted as a mentor. I could look at the objectives and I could read that funny thing like IPv4 and IPv6. Like, well, I don't know what those things are, but I knew they were important because they were in the objectives. And I knew that those objectives were created by literally thousands of working IT professionals. So I'm like, well, far be it from me to disagree with them about what's so certification really helps, and it also helped me understand the experience that I had. And there were many companies who then said, well, if you pass that certification, that's a pretty good indicator of your experience. So certification by itself may not stand alone, but it really helps. It's part of building that the beginning of a foundation.
And throughout of your professional career, how
Mhm.
do you stay up to date with the current industry trends? Are you continuing to take certifications? How does that work?
Yes, for example, I had to re-up my MC almost immediately when I got my MCSE, I had to re-up it. And then for a CompTIA, the certs that I had gotten were A plus and Network plus. And I immediately had to go out and get Security plus because I was asked to help create not only some coursework, but to do some actual pen tests. And this is around the time of right around the year 2001, I think, 2002. And I did a lot of work for a company back then called Symantec. They got, I think, bought by Mac. Uh, so I was asked to do that. And so, yeah, I just kept learning. And the thing that I found was that you have to keep learning not only about new things that come out, but you have to learn about the old stuff that organization, their business. Because if you go in, for example, to the aerospace industry or even into the airline industry, for example, as an IT professional, yeah, you'll work on really cool, Kubernetes and clusters and really fun things like Docker. Yeah, but you'll also be working with old mainframes because that's what airline industries use all the time. Old mainframes that are older than I am, and that's really old. Uh, you you're going to be learning about constantly new things. So certification really helps me create a pathway, an authoritative pathway. We did some surveys over the last few years asking experienced professionals what is, from a learning perspective, what's one of the toughest things. And one of the things that came out was even experienced professionals don't quite know the next step to take when they learn something. They realize that there's an area that they don't understand something, but they don't quite see the pathway. They lose the forest for the trees. In other words, they're so in on it and the trail or a pine cone on the trail or something, they don't take a step back and go, okay, here's where I need to go. So that's why we offer learning pathways at CompTIA and really emphasize that because that solves an industry problem in upskilling people. Yeah, so there's that.
And just for anybody who is kind of new to this, and you've only recently inquired, I think that's where it is essential to have your career consultation to understand what pathway is right for you. Even if you know you're a complete career change, then we have those pathways for beginners right the way up to expert level. So do have that career consultation. There's some really great questions coming in on the Q&A.
There
So
sure are. Yeah. Yeah.
should we start with one of these questions? So Jonathan Smart says, looking that James has seen the cybersecurity growing from an acorn, has James noticed any features within cybersecurity that will remain relevant no matter what age we live in?
One of the things that will remain relevant is your understanding of the CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, CIA. That's been around a long time. I think that came out through ISC2 and their CISSP certification. And what does it mean to to do that, to focus on confidentiality, integrity, and availability? Availability simply meaning you do backups and things. In the United States, we use the term redundancy, which has a different meaning, interestingly enough, in the UK. But the idea of resilience. So I'll use that word. That's what availability is all about. But I think in an AI world now, where we are ingesting and putting out tons of data, the idea of integrity is very important. What's the most important thing, Jono, when you're in an interpersonal relationship? I would argue things like integrity. Can you trust that person? Can you trust the situation? That's very important. Empathy, curiosity, those are all very positive human elements. But that integrity part, see, it's funny from a cybersecurity perspective, we think of integrity very much in terms of binary, like, well, you use hashes and you use encryption to prove that data hasn't been changed. But that term of integrity has become much more important with AI because if we're using tons of data and if we're using computers that mimic human behavior, then we better make sure that integrity is really high. So that's one thing. The second thing that I think is something that is going to remain very important is the need for visibility. And that's a fancy word or a fancy concept for the ability for a cybersecurity professional to actually visualize an attack or to visualize the status of a network. That is a holy grail kind of, how should I put this? It's a holy grail kind of goal that's been around for decades. When I first walked into a server room and I saw all of the physical web servers and I saw the firewall and I saw this equipment and I'm like, this is really cool stuff. And then I asked a question. I said, where's the computer that shows me all of the network traffic and the status of the network? Where's the computer that allows me to look at that? And the server administrator guy looks at me and goes, man, that's either the smartest question I've heard in a long time or the dumbest. I can't tell which, James. And I'm like, well, what did I do wrong? And he says, well, there is no such thing as a computer that allows you to kind of go in and take a look and get that wonderful view there. That's funny. We have all that. And he goes, well, we're too busy just kind of tactically doing stuff. He says, one day we'll get that. And just to prove what I'm trying to, not prove what I'm trying to talk about here, let me see if I can share a slide real quick. I'll just do this real quick,
Yeah,
John.
great.
If it, and because there are so many other really good questions, I don't want to shortchange them there. But folks, what do you guys see in this picture? This is a picture I took in the Great Teton National Park here a few years ago while I was hiking. What do you guys see in this picture? So hopefully you can see it. And I'm just going to look in the window here. Um, Type into the chat window what you see here in this. And John, okay, what do you see? You see a bunch of trees,
Bit of
grass,
foresty woods, yeah. See, maybe a nice spring afternoon.
a lot of greenery. We got trees. Ah, somebody typed it. David, thank you. There's a bear. Yes, there's a grizzly bear there.
Wow.
If you go back, can you see it now? There's a grizzly. My family saw the grizzly bear. See it right in the middle of the picture? The reason I like to show this is that you could argue that there's a threat actor here. I'm not sure if I was the threat actor or if the grizzly bear was, because my family immediately went, that's a bear, we're out of here. And they walked very quickly back to the truck about a mile and a half away. I ran towards her and took that picture. That's her looking at me going, what is this guy doing? Why is he here? And then she kind of started moving towards me, and that's when I left. Okay, I ran away. The reason I show this, folks, is visibility. We need that kind of visibility. Here's another picture. This is visibility of nature. In Seattle, where I live, it tends to rain a lot. Believe it or not, it's actually a very warm day today. But you usually, when you're flying in a plane, it's so rainy and cloudy, you don't see these mountains. You're looking at a pattern. There's Mount Rainier, that big one in the foreground. There's Mount Adams. There's Mount St. Helens and Mount Hood. You can see four mountains there. Maybe you can only see three of them, but if you look way in the distance, four. That's RASH, Rainier, Adams, St. Helens, and Hood. We look for patterns. And when it comes to data analytics, when it comes to cybersecurity, we look for those kinds of patterns. And when I was talking about the CIA triad, it's really very important for you to make sure that things remain confidential, that integrity and availability is there. But I would argue that cybersecurity is not just the old CIA triad anymore. I would argue that we focus on correlating data and providing information and aggregating and collecting and crunching and contextualizing information. So I just wanted to bring that up as an example. But thank you. And by the way, I couldn't help but think of that one picture of the bear because what she was doing is she was scraping the bark off of the trees that were downed, and she was eating the bugs in the trees. That's bears will eat anything. And I couldn't help but think, there's a threat actor living off of distressed resources, trees that have fallen down and, living off the bugs. Well, that's what pen testers do. That's what attackers do. They live off of software bugs and things like that. So, I love analogies. Um,
I I love that analogy too. And well done to everyone that actually spotted a bear. I didn't see that at all. Either.
well, it's kind of a trick question. I shouldn't pull that, but it's kind of fun to do. So there are all sorts of questions here about, for example, Jonathan. It's not a question, but he asked. It's tricky slipping that foot to the door. I think, which is a UK way of saying, how do you originally get in to prove that? Certification can be a help. There are some IT leaders and things that don't like certification. There's more IT leaders than not like certification. And they like certification for a couple of reasons. And I'm going to put up research that we have real quick. And this is just a real, I'm trying to answer the question, how can you prove your experience in a way that convinces people. That's persuasive. One of the things I learned in my PhD that might be useful was the ability to persuade. What is a suasive argument? That's the fancy way they say it. Well, so certification, I think, can be an indicator of achievement. It is also, I believe, a really good future predictor of future, how should I put it, performance. But check it out. Here are reasons why HR professionals like certifications, and why IT hiring managers like them. First of all, it helps them align their hiring to real job roles. It helps them meet regulatory requirements. One reason why you put a certification out there isn't necessarily to show your experience. Not necessarily, it can. But what it does is it shows the IT leader, hey, look at that. That person has security plus, or that person has data plus. That helps me prove that my team has been properly educated. Because and regulations will often require that. They actually ask, what education do you have? See, it helps check a box. Now, tick box or checkbox security can be a bad thing, but it can also be a good thing. Um, so that's why it saves them time, I think. So it's a very efficient predictor of success. So I just wanted to state that one, if that helps, Jono.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to visualize these with the slides as well. Just on the Q&A, Joseph asked this one, who was first in, I think. I did the CYSA Plus, Security Plus, Network Plus, and A Plus over a year ago now. Haven't got an IT job yet. Uh, Joseph got discouraged 3 months after obtaining the certs because of the limitation of not being in the UK for up to 5 years.
Huh?
What advice can we give to Joseph? Because the demand is global, whether say you've not been in the UK or not. What kind of advice do you think we can give to Joseph?
One of the first things is that experience level is a tough thing. There are a lot of organizations that frankly overspec their requirements. And when I say overspec, in other words, they'll say entry level job must have 3 years of experience. It's like, okay, if it's an entry level job, why is there so many years of experience? And if you can't prove that, then your resume gets rejected by the HR software and things like that, right? But here's one of the first things to think about. One of the first things I always like to think about when it comes to getting a job in cybersecurity, as you're starting out, you may not get, your dream cyber job might be a few years down the road, but you can get a job as an IT support tech or as a network support tech. Your first job might be adjacent, and that's a fancy word for saying next to that cybersecurity job. You work your way up. So I would focus on help desk jobs and things, or jobs that may not be cybersecurity, but work your way up to it. Some people will say, well, there's no such thing as an entry level security. I've seen people with relatively little experience get a junior security operations center SOC analyst job. I've seen that. But a lot of times people, they get started in a job that is adjacent to cyber. That's the first answer. Second answer, real quick, I would say is this. You need to get somebody to vouch for your knowledge level and experience level. And that somebody is some sort of mentor. Start networking. I think that's just really important. And to try to, boost that. When I say networking, I'm talking about using, LinkedIn or useful social media and getting to know people, but also physically get to know people. And I just put my LinkedIn uh, link there in the chat window. I know people who meet about every other week, maybe once a month, every couple of months. One time last time I was in the UK, second last time I was in the UK, I went to Reading from London and met with a group of CIOs. It was just a very informal meeting in a pub. It wasn't even a meeting; it was just a get together. And they get together about every to do that. Find those places, find those kinds of groups, and get to know people. It might seem a waste of time. It might seem really tough that if you've got 2 gigs already and a family and you're learning, and then I have to go out and network with people, that might seem like a real handful of stuff to do. I've been there. I know that. That's how I got my first job. My first job, I had networked with somebody, and that person called me and said, "Hey, are you interested in this little gig?" And that's how I got it. It didn't seem like much at the time, but then it snowballed. It's a very tough process, though. I'm not saying it's easy, but that networking is very important. So
It's a really empowering story, and now you've given everyone access to your LinkedIn. We need to utilize that as much as possible. But yeah, no, that's a great answer. That's a kind of a segue to where we were at the start of the conversation, just talking about your professional career. And Jonathan said CompTIA came before James, who he thought you started it. But how did you end up at CompTIA?
the way I ended up with CompTIA was a network. I got a phone call where the person said, "Hey, James, we've been talking about you," and I said, "Well, I'm sure nice things," and it actually was. So the way I got the job at CompTIA is I started taking my education background, not relevant to certification directly, but it was indirectly. And then I learned about things like instructional design. I learned about what it meant, the process of, and this is a very different thing, the process of creating certification exams. How does it start? It starts with a job task analysis. And then it starts with and then it continues with workshops that you do, and then you create objectives. And then from the objectives come the exam questions. And so I looked at psychometrics and things like that. But before then, I learned about the tech side of things as well. And by learning about the tech side of things, back then there really was no foundational kind of certification that said, look, here's how you get started. There was no ITF Plus or Tech Plus from CompTIA. Uh, Almost all of the organizations said, hey, we start at this level. You have to be, what is it? You have to be this tall to ride this ride kind of thing. Um, I was only this tall, and I had to myself come up with it and build it myself. That sucked. It was really tough. I had a job, I had a family, I had two jobs actually, two and a half jobs. Um, and so that was really tough, but I was able to pull it off. And I know if I can do it with my lack of organization, trust me, folks, you can. So the one thing that I did was I was working again on that PhD, but I knew that there were back then people were using email and people were using the internet. So I literally walked into the server room. Back then it was a server room rather than the cloud. I walked in the server room and just started asking questions. They're like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Look, I just want to learn stuff. You got any time?" And they're like, "Look, we're a bit busy right now, but how about we talk a little bit, later, when I get off work." And I literally sat outside the server room, and the guy came out and said, "Hey, you're still here. Let's go out and, chat for a little bit." And that's how I struck up a conversation. And after a while, people that he knew started calling me and saying, "Hey, James, I've got an issue. Can you help me with that? Because you helped somebody with that before, and we don't know what that is. Or I need you to go help those instructors that they don't trust us, but they'll trust you." And after a while, I was asking them questions, and then after a while, it was only a matter of months. Suddenly, they started asking me questions, and I'm like, "Well, yeah, if you remember going back at this," and they're like, "Oh, I hadn't thought of that." And so it started a dialogue. I think a lot of people, when they get out to start their experience, they feel like, okay, I've got my certification, I'll put it on the resume, and we're done. It just is not that easy. You have to start with some form of dialogue with the industry, and that means conversations. And the way to do that is to try to get that network going. You can do it virtually you can do it online, but also in person. Once you start a dialogue with people, it's amazing how doors that were closed suddenly open. Now, I remember that when it was that door that was closed, and I mean, it was closed. You cannot come in here. And then one day, the guy walked into the door and he goes, "Well, what's the matter, James?" And I said, "Well, he goes, no, come on in. You're allowed in." See that, opening that door, it was not easy, and it took longer than I wanted to. And trust me, I had lots of debt to pay off. It was tough, but it worked out.
I think Jonathan nailed it. He says, like James' attitude, persistent. And it sounds like you said it was brutal at one point. It sounded you were persistent as well.
I was persistent, and I changed things up because I also put tons of resumes out there. And this was early on. It was via fax, believe it or not. And then I used email, and then I used LinkedIn, and it was brutal. I mean, the sickening wet thud of the resumes not having an impact that I thought would happen was really tough for me. It was really tough because I just took it as a form of rejection, right? Probably shouldn't have, because it wasn't rejection. It wasn't even indifference. It was more I was going the wrong, I was going up the wrong alley. You know, I was knocking on the wrong door. There was nobody listening on the other side of it. And so I changed my tactics. And the way I changed my tactics was instead of spamming email or putting something out there on LinkedIn or whatever, I did an in-person things. I decided to get, you know, people and ask them questions and, you know, can you help me out with this? And you'd be surprised how much people want to help do that. They don't feel or aren't empowered to give you a job, but they'll give you knowledge and they'll give you wisdom about how IT works and about how IT hiring works. And that's a big deal. I learned a lot that way.
And then that's why, part of the reason we build our structured pathways as well, depending on what level you're at. If you are a complete beginner, you start off with those entry certifications, and with our career services team, you start immersing yourself in industry, updating your LinkedIn, having recommendations on those events to go to, all those things which you've touched on. And yes, it is brutal. You have to put the hard work in, but if you do, you can well get there. Um,
You know, sorry, go ahead, John.
no. You go, James.
Just very quickly, to your point about the mentors and things, I see, you know, getting on your, and I put cybersecurity here. Forgive me, I should have said cybersecurity and data career, but what your IT career, I like to think analogies, and analogies are metaphors. So think about taking a trip, right? You have to have an itinerary. You use a travel service. There's a flight to your destination. We're talking a big trip, you know, maybe to Mallorca or something. Customs, passport, the fun. You get the idea. On the right hand side of that table, if you see it, hopefully you can see this table. Um, uh, you know, embark on a career. Well, the itinerary is kind of the career you want to, you know, get in on, and the travel service is the training org or the instructor or the consultants that Jono's talking about here. This is something I've thought about quite a bit. You know, I travel a lot, so I go through customs. I go and have to use a passport. So, you know, what is customs? Well, you can argue that's the job interview or that process of submitting your experience. And but you have to have hands-on exercise. Best way that you can prove your experience is not just saying, hey, I got this certification or I know this topic. It's telling stories about how you solved a problem. And so I like this table because it's an analogy. It's like, okay, here I am taking a trip and then entering into an IT career. But let me tell you a quick story. A friend of mine um, was struggling to get a job, and interview after interview couldn't prove to anybody that he could do things physically. And one day he was in an interview with a bunch of people at Oracle. If you ever heard of Oracle, the database folks, the cloud folks. And make a long story short, you could tell by their body language. You know, there were two or three people in the interview. He could tell they're kind of leaning back in the chair and kind of, you know, asking questions, but just not really engaged. And one of the guys finally says, what kind of hobbies do you do? Well, you know, what do you like to do in your spare time? And he goes, well, I like to play, yeah, I like gaming a lot. And the guys are like, yeah, you know, a kid playing gaming, that's fine. And then they said, well, what do you do with gaming? And he goes, well, my favorite thing to do is I take my Xbox or my whatever game console and I take the cover off and I overclock the CPU and I flash the firmware to something a bit more current and sometimes semi, you know, if not illegal, but, you know, not authorized and things. And he said immediately it went from, they went, no, what? What did you do with the CPU? This, you know, well, I overclocked it and I was able to go in and change some of the pins and I could add RAM that, you know, not really authorized, but I could do it. And they just flipped out. They immediately became really engaged because this job was not a cybersecurity job, but it was a job supporting data centers that sometimes in a data center, what happens is a lot of hardware. For example, a hard disk might start to go out and the computer, the AI sometimes will say, hey, yeah, that computer's about ready to fail. And so there's a hard disk that needs to be swapped out. And his job would be to receive a ticket, you know, saying something is wrong, and then he'd go solve the problem. And see, he didn't think he had direct experience in that area. He's like, well, I don't change RAID array hard disks. I don't know what it means to go in and change that RAM as much. I took classes in it, but I'd never done it. But they're like, what are you talking about? You just said you stick RAM in an unauthorized way into that hardware. You overclock the CPU and you put in new hard disks and all that. He said, that's experience, folks. And you need to find honest but clever ways of unpacking that experience. And he got that job. And it wasn't because he had had a job in a previous data center. He said before then he had really never even seen a data center. But he knew how data centers work from that previous experience. I think all of us have that stuff, that latent, that's the fancy word for unexpressed experience in us. We just don't quite realize it. We need to tease that out.
So let's talk a bit more about data then, and I do want to
Sure.
come on to the question of AI as well. So we've got 15 minutes left, so please we'll get through to some more questions. So data analytics is currently ranks among the top 5 most in-demand skills in the UK, which was from a recent LinkedIn report, and we've spoken about the significant growth in terms of the
Ah,
demand for data professionals. Can you tell us about the CompTIA Data Plus and why that's such a sought after certification?
the reason why CompTIA Data Plus, CompTIA Data Plus is in demand is because it basically gives you the foundations of what it means to be a data professional. And so many times when people learning about data, they will mistake learning a data application for really understanding how data works. And there's probably a better way to phrase this, but for example, we use at CompTIA all the time. We use Power BI. We use uh, various tools out there. That's an example of a tool. It's called Power BI. Great tool. But what we find, folks, is that sometimes in the data world, the tool the tail can wag the dog, right? Now think about it. When a dog should be able to wag its own tail, right? The tail shouldn't wag the dog. Well, what happens is a lot of people learn the tool first. They learn a spreadsheet. I know how to work with spreadsheets. It's like, well, no, we don't need somebody who knows how to work with a spreadsheet or Power BI or whatever specific tool. We know you need to know somebody who knows the data lifecycle. We need to know somebody who understands what it means to collect data and then mine data, visualize data, and then govern data. That's a whole life cycle. And the great thing about Data Plus is it teaches people all of the elements of what it means to use tools correctly so that the tail or the tool doesn't wag the dog. So let me see if I can share my screen real quick, and I'll make this much more brief. Let's see, you should be seeing, if I can find it here. There we go. I'm sharing my screen now. This is the Data Plus certification webpage from CompTIA. Are you seeing that, or am I? Did I not?
Not yet.
Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can share it there.
I can't see it yet.
Can't see it yet. Tell you what, I'll put it into the chat window, the URL, so you guys can look at the chat window. Excuse me, can look at the URL. But the idea
Right.
behind Data Plus is it teaches basically four or five main areas and objectives so that you learn about how to collect data and then how to clean the data up. Because data, when it comes to us, is pretty dirty and we need to refine it. It's kind of like oil, right? We don't put oil, raw, unrefined oil into our cars that would destroy them. What we do is we have to refine that oil into various things, to motor oil, into transmission oil, into gasoline, petrol, or into diesel. That's my analogy for data mining. And then you do the actual analytics. And see, this way, if you have the right foundation, you can use any tool that's thrown at you. Well, it doesn't matter what the tool is, Power BI, or what's another data analytics tool, Jono, that you often use or that you teach uh, at, uh,
Tableau,
at people. Say it again.
Tableau, Power BI.
Thank you, Tableau.
Rachel.
Power BI. Thanks, Rachel.
Sorry.
Very cool. See, it's those kinds of things that you are going to visualize with Tableau, and you're going to do data analytics with Tableau or Power BI. But see, it's not so much, okay, I know how to use that tool. See, in a job interview, a good quality response would be, yes, I know these tools. But a better quality interview answer is, I can use tools to provide a narrative and start turning data, raw data, into actionable information. And here's a story about how I was able to kind of create the right kind of pie chart or the right kind of visualization on data that we all could know and trust. So I have the ability to create data, a situation where I can turn untrustworthy data or we don't know what's in there, and I can pull out information that people can trust. See, that is a great, and if you could tell the story about, well, one day I used a Tableau to do that, and I created a presentation that was very specific to executives. And executives, they don't want to hear anything more than about 2.5 words from you, right? Very short attention spans. Uh, they're very smart, but they're very short attention spans. And so, if you could tell a story about how you could properly put together data that's appropriate for an audience, see, that's a great answer in an interview, more than, yeah, I know that tool. So there's a bit of an answer for you, John.
Yeah, no, that's it's fascinating, and a lot of the time we're doing things that we don't know that we're doing that are actually transferable, and you are getting kind of real world hands-on experience.
Mm-hmm.
When we hear the phrase future-proofing your career, particularly in a digital world,
Yes.
what does that mean? We know in cybersecurity and data, the salaries increase with experience, and they can go quite high. But what does
Mhm.
future-proofing your career mean?
I think future-proofing your career means that you create a foundation so that pivoting is in a hacker perspective. The term pivot means a hacker makes a decision, and in that decision, they were going a certain direction, and then they go another direction. Pivoting is another word. Another phrase that I use a lot is negotiating with the inevitable. One of the things that's happening, we all know, is AI has entered the into the workforce. And it, like any automation technology, is capable of taking repetitive tasks and doing them far quicker than any human can do it. Okay. Now, does
God.
that mean that, oh, that means, James, I think you just said that there are no data analytics jobs that are going to be in the future, or that's going to be even harder to get an entry-level job. I don't agree with that. What any good AI tool does is it allows the worker with the right kind of foundation to pivot more quickly and go, oh, wow, man, now I can set up an agent to do some of those repetitive tasks so I can focus on unique knowledge. And the best answer is any good worker needs automation. We're all swamped. The reason why there is this something called technical debt, it's one of my favorite phrases, is because IT workers have to constantly skip steps because they're overburdened. And if you skip a step, that means that you've opened up kind of a problem. It could be a problem in the user experience, like, oh yeah, that's a really ugly web page. Well, I didn't have time to create a good looking one. Or yeah, there's a bug in that has a software issue that has a that could allow hackers in. Well, I was so busy I didn't have time to check the code. Well, AI and automation can do that checking for you. Does that mean we don't need security analysts because AI eliminates them? No way. What it means is that we need workers who have enough of a foundation to pivot and say, well, I can automate that task. A friend of mine once used the phrase the security alert dance. And I'm like, what is the security alert dance? And he said, trust me, when you are overwhelmed with too many security alerts, you are going like this at your keyboards. He said, that's the security alert dance. It's almost like a seizure, James. And I said, well, how do you avoid that? He says, we use AI to automate stuff. And it makes a human being a lot more calm and making good decisions and not reacting to data. But instead of reacting to data, they're creating information and they're actually processing information rather than doing the security alert dance. So the best thing I would say is to have a foundation of knowledge so that when something new comes in, you can make a wise decision to say, okay, I can let AI take care of that. Or no, that's that a brain still needs to be thinking of. And that's just so important. I see a lot of workers who don't have uh, they have great jobs, but they lack fundamental areas, foundational understanding. Some workers don't understand MAC addresses. They don't understand DNS properly. For some reason, that just was skipped. And the best thing you can do is to make sure that you have a right foundation and things, and that'll let you.
Rachel's politely got her hand up.
I just want, yeah, sorry. And I've been typing as quick as I can to the audience. Lots of brilliant questions that yeah, I definitely encourage you to talk to some of our consultants because it's just not enough time tonight to answer in detail. But on AI, can't support enough what James is saying. One of the things that we did last year is that we introduced Introduction to ChatGPT, which is a nice little bit of additional learning that comes in all of our pathways now to give
Yes.
people some basic principles around prompt engineering, the ethics of AI. So when people are going for interview, they can stand out from other candidates by, whilst they might not be a machine learning expert at this stage, they understand the role of AI in industry and business, and they're not afraid of it, and they understand the parameters of how they're going to work. This year, we've moved it on. And in fact, in our cyber and data analyst pathways, we've also introduced some AI certification programs as well. So one with Microsoft Azure, one with AWS, and of course, we'll be doing the CompTIA one as well. So what we've started to say, James, in all of our pathways is that we want to make sure that our students are rounded individuals, great technical skills, great soft skills, and also a really strong awareness of the impact of AI in industry. So I just wanted to sort of put that out there that, learning people are on the case. We want to give our students the best chance.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. That's really excellent. I think I can't agree with that more. One thing that
Sorry, James, can we just expand on this subject? Because I know it's something that a lot of people want to talk about. It's just how will AI affect the tech industry in general, and will it take over roles?
I don't believe it'll take over entire roles, but it's going to morph them. I think what I use the term the A/B test, and an A/B test is a marketing concept. Well, it's a concept in lots of areas, but A/B meaning, well, in marketing, you could say, well, here's a web page, and that's A, and then here's the second web page, there's the B. Well, which one's more effective? It's called the A/B test, right? What does that have to do with AI? In 2030, okay, 5 years from now, if we could suddenly fast forward and ask, well, what does a security analyst job or what does a pen tester job look like? Or an incident responder look like 5 years from now? It'll have changed. That job role will still exist, but it will change a lot because AI is going to morph the skills that are necessary in there. Does it mean that we won't need those skills anymore? Absolutely not. We're still going to need incident responders 5 years from now. In fact, we'll need them. One of the changes you're going to see in incident responders is not only are incident responders going to handle the acute 3 a.m, oh my gosh, we've been hacked, wake up kind of response, but what you're going to see incident responders doing is handling chronic incidents. The slow moving little teensy little people when they make bad decisions as a developer, for example, I'll point at developers. Or the cloud worker who okay, I'm using an old password but or something with low software. That's what I mean by chronic incidents. AI will make it possible to track those and visualize those, so an incident responder will become more like a vulnerability manager, and those will kind of morph together. Does that mean there are fewer jobs out there? I think it's going to create more jobs. They might be a bit more shift left or a bit more difficult to get to know and challenging. You'll have to react more quickly, but I would believe that they're going to be around, and they'll look different, but the jobs won't go away. 2 years ago, I had somebody in the Netherlands, close by to UK, say, "Oh, in 2 years we won't need security analysts anymore." Well, I just got finished a tour of the Pentagon and also in the UK, the GCHQ. Trust me, they need security analysts. They're going to need them. Has that changed a bit? Absolutely. Now you have AI acting as a coworker, as a co-pilot, and they're using it. You get a threat feed that would take an hour to read. Well, you have AI co-pilot read through it and gives you a nice summary in 5 minutes. That just saved you 55 minutes. Trust me, to get away from that security alert dance, you need that 55 minutes back. Does that mean, that just means we're security analysts? That means that you're going to have the same amount, if not more, and they'll be more effective. I think one of the things that's holding back the security analytics, the pen testers, there are dozens of job roles within cybersecurity. I think the main thing holding them back is that too many of these guys these people in these job roles are not able to get deep into the technology and deep into solving problems because they're constantly working on the surface of things and they're constantly putting out fires. AI is going to allow the people, smart ones, to get deeper into these problems. If that doesn't happen, then we won't need security analysts at all because cybersecurity will be impossible to do. And it's not because AI is doing it, it's because nobody's doing it, because it's just going to be a darn mess. And that's not going to happen. People were, the industry is really smart. It's figuring things out, and AI is part of the solution. So in 30 years, when AI is smarter than us and it gets rid of all of us, you know, I'm not much of an Arnold Schwarzenegger, a believer in that kind of future. I think that it's going to morph things, and in a good way. There are companies that are going to move cynically with AI. We've seen it a lot. I saw 5 years ago, oh, AI eliminated these jobs, that came from the tech sector. Nonsense. Nonsense. That was a company that used AI as an excuse for that. So anyway. So yeah, people are going to lose their jobs to AI. There's no question. But I think they are going to get more jobs if they keep learning and morphing and they have a good foundation. That's my belief.
I'm just putting it out there. When the AI does take over in the next 30 years, when I'm using ChatGPT, I'm starting to say please and thank you every single time, just so it
Yep.
favors me for when they do take over.
It's like he was nice to me. I'm going to let him survive. Yeah,
That's exactly the thought process. Yeah. Um,
absolutely.
fantastic. Well, we've run over very slightly. Are there any other questions from you, Rachel?
Sorry, just coming off audio. No, apologies if I didn't give everybody a very specific answer, but please click that link, talk to a career consultant. It doesn't cost you anything. They'll give you advice. They'll talk you through options. We're here to help.
Kabir asked a question. I'm learning cloud computing. How can I understand CompTIA more easily? First of all, go to CompTIA.org. And one of the things you can do is there's the Career Explorer. Google it. Just Google it. CompTIA Career Explorer. I think that will help you understand what you can do with the cloud better. I think there are also, there was, I think, one other question I wanted to ask really quick. Osara said, how do I start learning with learning people on a cybersecurity course? And the answer is get with those mentors, get with those career counselors. They'll be able to show you the moves that will allow you to do well in this kind of AI world that we're in. So, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, James. I think one of the key takeaways is that if you are starting out fresh and just breaking into industry, immerse yourself into the industry and be prepared to work hard, but be persistent as well. The hard work will pay off.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jono. And Jono, thank you so much, Rachel. It's always a pleasure talking with you folks and with your
we love listening to you. A fountain of knowledge. It's amazing. And if I ever need to know an answer about something to do with cyber AI data, then James is my man. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I echo that. The pleasure's all ours. So yeah, thank you everybody for joining us. Please do get in contact if you have any more questions. James, enjoy your day, which is just about starting over on the west coast of America, and everyone else enjoy their evenings.
Thank you so much, man. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.